We are delighted you chose to be with us tonight. We want you to have a safe and wonderful experience. Please be assured that your safety as well as your enjoyment of the event are our utmost concern. Please take a moment, look around, and identify the nearest two exits. Whether in a virtual setting at your home or physically in some form of venue, you must always be ready. So please identify two exits in your current location in the event it is necessary to evacuate quickly and orderly. Also, during this COVID 19 pandemic, please remember to wear your mask, wash your hands, and always stand 6 feet apart from others. Please enjoy the event and continue to be safe.
My name is Ed Josie. I'm the president of Staten Island branch of the NAACP, and I'd like to welcome all of the candidates to this session tonight and all the participants from the community who'll be watching. I'd like to welcome you all to this program tonight. Now, it's very important that we understand these forums are to get the community more involved in voting. Without a vote, you have no voice. I've been told this all my life, and I still believe that. I always believe that. So I urge you to get out and vote. Okay, at this point, I'd like to give the rest of the program to Jazzy Robinson, a community activist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Josie. Welcome to this evening's forum, sponsored by the Coalition of Staten Island Black-led community-based organization. My name is Jasmine Jazzy Robinson, and I'm a member of the NAACP Staten Island branch, and I'll be a moderator for our federal representative candidates running for the U.S. Senate and Congress. The rules for the evening are as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, 90 seconds to answer questions that were predetermined by the coalition. Should you have questions and should there be time, then please put them in the Q&A box and Mr. Neil Berry will read off those questions should there be time. We look forward to providing a comprehensive forum featuring the candidates vying to be your next congressperson and your next U.S. Senator. I hope tonight is a valuable experience that all members of the Staten Island community remember to participate in elections during the early voting starting this Saturday, October 29th and or November 8th. Now I invite former Congressman Max Rose to give his opening statement.
Jesse, thank you so much. And thank you to all the incredible leaders on this call. Look, I truly want to get to the conversation piece here. None of us are strangers to one another. And that's what's important here. Service is really what matters. You all know me, and you all know that I've lived a life of service, not just to the community, but to the nation as well. The stakes of this election are incredibly high. And this boils down to who's going to actually fight for the issues at hand, whether it's affordability, safety, protecting freedom to include a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions, or who will appeal to political extremism. You all know that based off my record, I've always been willing to do the hard thing and the right thing, not just the politically easy thing to do. And I will always give everything I have to the community. And that goes for yesterday, that goes for today, and that certainly goes for tomorrow. So it's an honor to be here with you all. Thank you for taking the time. And it truly has been my honor to serve this community and will be my honor going forward. Thanks again, Jazzy.
Thank you, no problem. So here's the first question. Affordable housing is a major problem in New York City. However, what specific plan do you have for public and federally subsidized housing reform for Staten Island?
It's a great question, Jazzy. Look, I think that when it comes to NYCHA, there are two sides of the coin. One is that it has been chronically mismanaged. And I think protecting and resourcing the federal monitor of the NYCHA program is important to make sure that the city is held to a standard and that our collective taxpayer funds are utilized wisely and correctly. The second thing, and just as importantly, though, is that we have got to make sure that housing across the board is funded adequately and that nobody is living in dire circumstances and dire conditions. I know you've been a very strong advocate for this throughout your career. We've all, or at least many of us, have seen the really sad conditions that some people are forced to live in, whether it's their heat getting turned off, their kitchen appliances not working, mold in their apartment. That's not just for NYCHA, that's also for many of the recipients of whether it's Section 8 housing or other housing voucher-like circumstances. I'm particularly thinking of Park Hill in that regard, which leads to the second part of your question, which is that when someone is receiving taxpayer-funded housing assistance programs, talking about the developers or the owners of real estate, it is absolutely critical that we hold them to a much higher standard than what we've been holding them to date. We also have to make sure, certainly, that everyone who is eligible for these programs is able to receive the assistance, and that the programs are adequately resourced. I think if we did those two things, we go a long way towards dramatically improving the condition of housing, both on Staten Island and throughout New York City, as well as throughout the country.
Thank you. My second question is this: assuming your victory, how would you address education priorities, especially affecting underperforming schools on Staten Island, and particularly the North Shore? Please be specific as possible.
Yeah, so the first and foremost, I think that it is massively important that we get New York City the funding that it deserves, so that we can pay teachers what they're deserving to be paid, and that our schools can get the funding that they need. It's one of the reasons why the funding that Democrats all too often have fought for New York City is so vitally important. We have seen that in recent times, but I think with those funds, it's really critical that standards come with that, and those standards can come out of the Department of Education. Okay, but what I will not ascribe to is just standards associated with testing. I want to make sure that our schools have art programs. I want to make sure that our schools have extracurricular activities. I want to make sure that as much as possible, we're building childcare as a critical fixture of our schools. I want to make sure that schools can be an epicenter of social service provision as well. This is particularly important in the North Shore, where in the communities in which you and I both live in, they are incredibly diverse, socioeconomically as well as racially, and people are living very busy and complex lives, and very often the school needs to be the base in and around that. Now, when it comes to the federal government, this often means getting the city the resources it needs, and the state government the resources it needs to adequately fund these programs, albeit in a fiscally disciplined manner. And I have been and always will be an advocate for that.
Thank you. And the last question is, how would you empower communities to be more engaged in civic matters that directly affect their families and communities? How would you include, No Child Left Behind advocates, advocates of the Black Lives Matter, Mothers Against Senseless Killing, True to Life, anti-gun violence? So how would you engage those groups so that they can be more empowered, more engaged, and to really come out and vote and know the facts and know what's going on, and to be more engaged and not be uninformed?
Well, Jazzy, you got to show up. That's the first important thing. There's not a person in this meeting who I haven't met with and personally and spoken, about the issues personally. We have got to make sure that as we pursue fairness for all and safety for all, and there's no reason why we should have to choose between the two, that we're not also investing in many of the different root causes of violence prevention. And so many of the organizations that we're talking about here today are involved in that. But look, I think that it also matters that the person that represents you in this district is also showing the courage to take the right votes for our communities in Congress. There's no reason why Staten Island and the North Shore and every other community on Staten Island should have a representative who's voting against banning assault weapons. who's voting against universal background checks. There's no reason why we should have someone who's voting against red flag laws. There's no reason why we should have someone voting against the money that New York City needs desperately so as to prevent, at the height of a pandemic, teachers being fired and cops being fired and firefighters being fired and all the like. What I am not going to do is ever seek to divide our community in accordance with some political objective, but I will always seek to provide for the community and fight for the community. I nearly lost my life for this country, and it's because I believe in what we're all, our potential collectively as a nation. It's because I love this country and I love our community. And I think there's nothing we're not capable of if we don't put our minds to it and unite around it. So it's one of the reasons why your questions are all so inspiring, because they reveal what we're truly capable of. And it would be my honor to continue fighting for them as your congressman.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have any more questions. Neil, do you have, Mr. Neil Berry, do you have any questions in the chat for Mr. Max Rose?
There's no questions in the chat or in the Q&A. There are no questions.
All right. I think I see one question, and really quickly, Max, if you can answer this. This is regarding Roe versus Wade.
Sure.
Being that has been overturned, how will you protect reproductive justice, reproductive reforms for women and people
Absolutely.
able to reproduce?
No, and the question's a really important one. And at the conclusion of this, I regret that I might have to jet. But look, this is an issue of civil rights and an issue of freedom. Every woman in the United States of America, irrespective of what state she's living in, is deserving of the right to make her own reproductive health decisions. And I say this as someone who understands the gravity of this situation. And, my 2.5 years ago, my wife and I adopted a baby boy, who many of you have met. You've held him, Jazzy. And it's not lost on me that my son's birth mother could have made a different decision that would have resulted in my wife and I not having the joy of our son every day. But that was her decision to make, and it remains a woman's decision to be made in consultation with her family and her spiritual mentor and her doctor. The consequences of Congress's inability to federally protect abortion rights into law, protect those in law, has been disastrous throughout the United States of America. We've seen abortion bans triggered. We've seen people fleeing states after being raped and impregnated. We've seen people forced to carry dead fetuses in their womb. We've seen women denied chemotherapy. And I think this country is better than that. And I believe it's the role and function of the federal government to protect critical freedoms, such as a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions. And that is something that I will fight for every single day. And it's regrettable, and I think even disgraceful, that our current Congresswoman believes that this is a states' rights issue. And she has every right to have that belief. But I think the consequences of that, in fact, I know the consequences of that belief, have been abortion bans in multiple states and really tragic circumstances. And I think this country deserves more than that.
All right. Thank you, Max, for answering the questions that we have here. And I understand that you have to go. So, I mean, we already know who you are. If you want to give just a brief closing, before you go.
Jesse, thank you again. I love that background, by the way.
Thank you.
Just again, so much of change involves real, incredible, selfless commitment on the ground and transformative leadership on the ground and bridge building and trust building on the ground. I've never seen an issue in regards to community growth and community development that isn't really complex. And you all are incredible leaders in that regard. And it is my hope and my dream that I can just work to help get you the resources that you so desperately deserve so we can bring more impactful change. So thank you again, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Max Rose, for participating in tonight's forum. We wish you the best of luck in your race. Thank you. Now we have Diane Sayre, who's running for U.S. Senator, and she will provide her opening remarks.
Great, thank you so much. So as you know, I'm Diane Sayre. I'm an independent candidate for Senate, which meant that I had to get 45,000 signatures to place my name on the ballot. I'm the only person in the state who managed to meet that threshold. My background is that I am a trained classical musician. I was raised in a Quaker family in New England, have been politically active since my time at the conservatory as a collaborator of the late American former presidential candidate Lyndon LaRouche. And I think the biggest crisis facing us right now is whether we are going to have possibly a nuclear war, which is not survivable, and a breakdown of the financial system with shortages of food and fuel and hyperinflation. And that's really why I'm running.
Thank you so much. And for the first question, is that on January 6th, 2021, we saw an attack on our democracy. It was a very dark day in American history. And how will you, should you be elected, how will you prevent such a horrendous act happen again? How will you prevent that?
Well, you may not like this answer, but I think that we have to actually ensure that the majority of the American people feel that their vote is counted fairly. And that's across the board, because I've run for office before and I have seen, personally experienced very peculiar things. And therefore, I am sympathetic to the idea that people may feel that an election is not transparent. I think we need to return to paper ballots. I think that the voting day should be a holiday and every effort should be made to get everybody who wants to vote to the polls. I myself am not totally convinced of everything that happened on that day and would like a more full investigation. And actually, I was not at the Capitol building. I was at the Ellipse when Trump was speaking with a big sign saying, "Pardon Julian Assange." I thought that that was a terrible mistake, that he was not pardoned and remained in prison. So from a certain point of view of having been in the vicinity, I am not sure that the entire truth has come out about the situation. I absolutely do not condone violence. I do not condone trying to turn over an election after it has been declared. And that's why I'm saying we need something where people feel confident that it's been counted. And if they did a bad job with their campaign, then they can take a lesson from that and do better the next time.
Thank you. The second question is, with Roe versus Wade being overturned, should a person's right to choose be taken away? Please be specific in your answer.
It depends on the person. You would, I suppose, consider me pro-life. The way these questions are framed, for example, I said that to someone and they said, that means that if the person is raped, the mother's health, incest. I said, no, it's a case-by-case basis, but our government has to make it possible for people to live. My husband probably would not exist had Roe v. Wade existed when he was born. He was adopted. I think we need to do something about affordable housing, universal health care. We need to take away the economic factor that contributes so much both to termination of pregnancy, and also I'm afraid to things like assisted suicide, things that are all based on cost. I don't think you can pit human life against a dollar amount. And I think if we can change that, then perhaps we will see a change in what seems to be a kind of disregard of human life.
Thank you for that. And the last question is, Amazon labor union is a growing movement. Folks are engaging and fighting for better wages and working conditions. This grassroots effort is inspiring and providing hope to many. How will you use your position as senator to fight for better wages, safe working conditions for all workers, whether they're in the private or public sector?
Well, I was actually joined the Amazon workers on their picket lines a couple of times in the city. I think what we have to do is actually the kind of thing that FDR did with the Pecora Commission. I think we have to put Wall Street and the City of London through bankruptcy. We have to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act because it seems that the people with the most money get away with the most egregious violations, and the people who work very hard, like home health care workers, I know they just got a $2 per hour, I think, raise, but given the kind of work that these people do, they are very underpaid, just like people who work in nursing homes, group homes, drivers. So I would act to ensure that we protect our people who are working, and that we revive the US productive economy. I think the entire wage scale is really skewed, where the people who do the least amount of work and make the most amount of money in doing things that probably should be illegal versus people who work really hard, jeopardize their safety and health and make very little. I think the whole thing has to really be changed. You're muted.
Thank you. Our timekeeper and question facilitator, Mr. Neil Berry. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we have one question. The question is, do you think that January 6th was not a violent insurrection?
To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I know there are 14,000 hours of videotape footage that for some reason have not been released. I know that somehow that was used as a pretext to keep people from being able to go through the halls of Congress and meet their congressman. Now you can't even go in there unless you have an appointment. So I would like a full investigation, which is not one-sided. I'd like to know everything that went on. I'd like to know how decisions were made, about how little law enforcement and other things that we had. I would like to know why 60 or more of the people who were involved in that remain in solitary confinement. I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered.
That was the only question we had in Q&A or the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Now you have a minute for your closing.
Okay, I will just say that in 2014, after the Staten Island grand jury decision not to indict in the case of Eric Garner, I created a large citywide community chorus, because I think that we have to elevate the discussion. There's too much in our society which is based on revenge and retribution. And it is a very dangerous thing when people feel they cannot get justice, as in the case of the Garner family. I mean, finally, the officer got fired, but that really did not address the situation. So, as I said, I mean, the reason I'm a musician, I suppose, is because I really think we have to elevate mankind to think about all of these matters in different terms And I think the thing that is the most precious is the ability of human beings, no matter what their background or where they come from, to make creative discoveries that benefit mankind as a whole. And I think that's the primary thing that the government should be protecting.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to our group, our coalition. We appreciate your answers, and we appreciate the time that you took to speak with us. There being that there's nothing else further, we bid you good night, and thank you once again, and good luck to you in your race. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Diane Sayre, for participating in tonight's forum. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you. And also thank you to Mr. Neil Berry for handling the Q&A portion of the forum. Now that concludes our portion, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Josie. Mr. Josie.
I would like to thank all the organizations who got together to put this forum on tonight. I would like to thank the candidates who came forth to speak. Please keep in mind that October 29th, we start early voting. Now, this is very important because I've always had the concept that if you don't vote, you have no voice. Without a voice, you have no power. Without any power in this community, why should they pay you any attention at all? Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we will have another session with the governor and lieutenant governor. Please tune in. Thank you very much.